Hello everybody and welcome to a feature overview of Autodesk MotionBuilder. We've got MotionBuilder launched here on the screen in a default layout of editing. I've created a special layout called Rob's Demo. So we see we've got a demo shelf created. Let's click on the one icon and it shows us the first topic that we're going to look into is procedural rigging within MotionBuilder. We've got a character, Gaunt 2009, that ships with the software, and we're just looking at his basic geometry and his skeleton structure that has come in from a third-party application. And I just wanted to do a quick little rotation to say yes, he is a skinned character. That skinning information has come through. Let's just undo that, turn off the manipulator. Let's look at this in a schematic view and we'll see that we have a basic skeleton hierarchy as well as some geometry. Bounce back here to the viewer window. And we're going to start to look at the MotionBuilder character. So I'm going to take a character from our templates folder, drag and drop it onto the hips joint, and I'm going to perform a characterization. It asks me if I want a biped or a quadruped. In our case, we want a biped. And once I've dragged on to our Gaunt character, we have something called character in the scene now. We can rename that character. Let's call him Gaunt. And we'll show off the character definition. I'm just going to expand this window out a little bit. Turn off characterization so you can read it a little better. This is the mapping tables to say that the MotionBuilder character on this side needs to map to objects that you brought into your scene. In Gaunt, we showed off with his hierarchy. We have the same names in our skeleton as was expected in the MotionBuilder character tool, so we can do it as a simple drag and drop operation. The basic 12 joints that are required to run character are here. And we also have auxiliary and spine and additional roll, and you can see all of the different categories of supplementary joints that are available. Let's recharacterize him now. As a biped, let's just refresh our windows and bounce over to the character settings at this point. We'll activate him in his stance input. See, nothing has changed at this point. And we're going to change the input, instead of being a stance, to be a control rig. Since there's no control rig currently in the scene, we're going to create one. It asks you if you want an FKIK or an IK only. Let's select FKIK and elaborate a bit on it. So you see that now we have multiple colored skeletons within the scene. Let's go back to our schematic view. We'll just arrange all of that information and see that we have what we've seen before from Gaunt's skeleton hierarchy and his geometry. We also have an FK skeleton and an IK effector system that is set up for us within the scene. Go back to perspective and start looking at the character controls window for our friend Gaunt here. In full body keying mode, we'll select the left hand effector, we'll activate the translation manipulator, and we'll just start moving it, and it's a pretty standard IK chain. As you move it, it would expect to move, but let's just move it a little bit past the limit of that arm, and you'll see that by default, the character and the control rig mechanisms are full body, so that if you pick an effector and pull it past the limits of the arm, it will then start to affect the rest of the body based on the pinning and pull settings that you have configured for each character depending on your requirements. So that's all pretty straightforward. Let's look at something else that's pretty powerful about characters. So we have by default a wrist, more or less created in the wrist position. But just say we had some props or some object interaction that we had to deal with in the scene. It's as simple as adding an additional effector into the scene. Let's say create auxiliary effector on left wrist, and now let's go into pivot mode and let's offset that to somewhere, say, in the middle of the palm. So now when we go back into transformation mode, we can now control it from the middle of the palm instead of at the wrist, which is quick and powerful. You'll see that we have an X icon on our character here, and then we can toggle between the two. That gives you extreme flexibility and power utilizing the character tool. So that's in the IK chain. Let's examine something else. Let's look at the ankle, where you would want to have some kind of additional pivot information on occasion. So by default, the pivot is set at the ankle. As you can see, it rotates around the ankle. But just as we did with the wrists, let's go in and let's create an auxiliary pivot in this case. So you'll see that it creates an additional pivot a little bit offset. So let's just go into pivot mode again. Let's frame in on that and just position it as we would like, just kind of at the heel, for example. Because there are times when you're going to want to roll around the heel. And not the actual ankle. So that's kind of bounced out of there. And get that in and in right around the heel. And exactly like we've done, as soon as we go back into model transformation mode and we're into rotation, instead of rotating at the ankle, we're able to manipulate that foot around its auxiliary pivot here. And again, we see the green X in the GUI here, and we can toggle between which ones we want active at any given time.